Hey guys, today we're going to talk about how I quit my job and what has happened in the process of that, kind of what's happened after that. So, to start it off, I want to talk about how things were going with my job. So, I was a center supervisor at a plasma donation center, and I was working about 45 to 60 hours a week, depending on the week. A lot of weeks I was working 6 days, and it was not enjoyable. I really enjoyed my job itself, but I wasn't a fan of the work environment. I wasn't a fan of the hours, the long stretches. A lot of times I would wake up, take my kids to daycare, go to work, and I wouldn't see them till the next day because I was working so much. Um, with that job, I didn't have a lot of free time because on my weekends that I did have off, I finally had off, so we had a lot of plans or we had a lot of stuff to do. It was at a point in my life where I was willing to work my life away, but I also wasn't super happy. I was kind of depressed with where I was at. So it was hard to kind of decide on what I wanted to do. So at the time, my plan was to just keep doing it. Hopefully, things would get better. Hopefully, we would get more staff. Obviously, that's really wishful thinking, but that's kind of where I was at leading up to what happened. So what happened next was I was on my first day of a much needed 2 week vacation. I had just worked, I think, 12 days in a row, and I was crabby and I was just ready for vacation. So on my first day, I went and hung out with one of my friends, and she had bought a pool, so we were putting up her pool and getting her backyard kind of ready to go for summer. And the day was really nice. It was probably 70, 80 degrees in Wisconsin on a June day, and we were having a couple drinks, putting a pool together, which was not something I don't think we ever thought we would be doing. And I spent all day there, and then a thunderstorm rolled in. So, towards the end of the night, I went home and I made bacon, and then I was sitting on my living room floor, and all of a sudden I got this really weird headache out of nowhere. And I just thought, my head hurts, I'll be fine. I took a bunch of ibuprofen and I went to bed. I woke up the next day and I seriously felt like I was going to murder someone. I was so crabby. I was so disoriented. I had the worst headache in the world. Like, it felt like my migraine doubled since the day before. I couldn't use my left side. Like, I was trying to text and my thumb wasn't working and my fingers wouldn't really work, and I was kind of stumbling around, and so I chalked it up to the migraine. I didn't ever get them, but I was like, you know what, maybe that's what this is. So I assumed I was fine, and I went about my day. Me and the kids went with my fiance to work because he was working up in Door County, which is a really cool place in Wisconsin that I had never been to. So we went up there. It was kind of cold. It was probably in the 60s, and I was just not having it that day. I was so crabby. I was biting Cody's head off with everything that he said. I have since then apologized for that, but then we were out and about. We went off to some cliff. I don't even remember the name, but we were at this park, and I was trying to walk on the grass and around the trees, and I was just running into everything, and I was like, what the hell is going on? And I messaged my parents and I kind of told them what was going on, and they're like, well, you should probably go in because you might be having a heat stroke. And I'm like, no, I'm used to Wisconsin, it's fine. And they're like, well, you were out in the sun all day, you were drinking. I'm like, I didn't have that many drinks. I kept telling them I was fine. Well, fast forward to the next day on a Saturday. I was at home and I woke up and I felt worse. I didn't know I could feel worse, so I messaged them and I was like, hey, I don't feel good. And they threatened to call an ambulance on me, so I went to the walk in. The walk in was a minute from our house, so I just drove myself there. I went to the walk-in, told them I had a really bad migraine and a couple other things going on. They asked me a few questions, and like I have a little bit of medical background. Like I've gone to school, taken a bunch of courses for it, and so like I kind of understood what they were asking me. So like they were asking me if my face was numb and just like classic stroke symptoms, and I'm like, why are you asking me this? Like, I'm fine. And they kept listing stuff off, and they started hitting some things that actually pertain to me. And I was like, yeah, yeah. And they were like, well, we think you need to go to the ER. And I was like, I'm fine, really. They're like, no, you need to go. They would not tell me what they thought it was. And I was like, I'm not going to the ER. I don't want that bill. And they said either they called an ambulance for me or they had Cody pick me up and take me to the ER. I'm like, what is with people and calling ambulances on me this weekend? Like, seriously, I was so annoyed. Like, looking back on it, it wasn't just annoyance, it was a whole lot of other stuff going on, but I was just genuinely irritated. I'm like, I am not paying the $800 for an ambulance. Like, no. So I had Cody take me to the doctor, and they kind of planned on giving me like Vicodin and sending me home, but then I think it was Cody mentioned that like they thought it might be a stroke, like my parents mentioned that or something. And they were like, well, does your family have a history of strokes? And I listed off who had strokes in my family, so they're like, okay, we'll do a head CT. So I went to the head CT, came out, like that was nothing new, I've had those before. And I was sitting in the room with Cody, and he was a little freaked out, and then they came into the room by me, and they're like, so your next CT looks good, but your head CT doesn't. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, is it a tumor? Is it a brain bleed? Did I smack my head too hard on something? Like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, we're not really sure. We see something on your head CT, but we don't really know what it is. And I'm like, that's reassuring. So they took me for an MRI. So I had like a brain MRI, and then when I was coming out of the imaging, the doctor was in there kind of waiting to see the results, and I was waiting for some like transport to take me back up to the room. And he goes, "It looks like you had a mini stroke." I'm like, "No, I didn't." And he's like, "No, like that's what it looks like." I'm like, I think you're lying. And he's like, no, seriously, like, it looks like you had a stroke. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I didn't. And, like, it took a lot of convincing for them to tell me that I had a stroke. And when I got back into the room, I kind of told Cody what he said, and he's like, seriously? Like, what? And I was 24 years old, healthy otherwise, and I'm like, there is no way that I had a stroke. And they came into the room. Sure enough, it was a stroke. So there was like a few moments of silence of like, I'm in shock. And they told me that it was not going to affect pretty much anything, that I should be fine to go back to work at the end of my 2 weeks off. And I was like, okay, great. And as the days went on, more deficits kept appearing. I was having a hard time talking. I was having a hard time walking. A bunch of stuff happened. And then, fast forward, it was like 2 weeks later, I think. 3 weeks later. It was like right before I had to go back to work. Like my stroke symptoms relapsed, but worse. So I could not walk at all. Like I was collapsing and I couldn't think straight and I was forgetting everything. Like it was really bad. So I ended up getting admitted to the hospital and they kept me there for about a week. I got out like right before the 4th of July. And I ended up having to do physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. I I couldn't even like leg press 5 pounds. Like it was awful. I think that was like the most I did at the beginning of it. And with speech therapy, I ended up doing physical therapy and speech therapy all the way until December, so for about 6-ish months. And then um, occupational therapy, I kind of had it for a few months, but it didn't really do a whole lot for me. But basically, I spent 7 months trying to get back to normal. I spent a lot of time with people telling me, like, you look great. You don't even look like you had a stroke. You're great. You're fine, right? And it was so hard to tell people, like, I'm not fine because, like, I look fine. Like, looking at me, you would never know that I had a stroke unless you watch the way I walk. Because I like waddle now. It's really weird. So hopefully there's never a video of me walking that you guys will have to see. But yeah, it was really hard. I got really, really depressed and anxious because I constantly had people like talking at me and my brain couldn't process like everything going on around me. So it was a challenge. It was hard listening to people saying that you look great, like you should be fine, right? You should be fine to do this and that, and like you can go back to work. Why can't you go back to work? Like, it was really hard to explain to them, like, why I was having so many issues with going back to work. But after about 6-ish months, I told my speech therapist I thought I was ready to go back to work, and she agreed with me. So, I had a lot of people asking me if I was sure if I wanted to go back. Honestly, like, if they would have asked me 4 months in, I would have said, like, I have no idea if I'll be able to go back. Like, 2 months in, I thought I was never going back to work. I was so behind. Like, I couldn't even do third grade math. It was really bad. So I had to make the decision that I wanted to go back or didn't want to go back, and I'm not the type of person who was like, oh yeah, I just sat on leave for 6 months and now I'm not going to go back. Like, I had to go back. So, fast forward the 7 months, I went back. Why did I go back? I needed to try and go back. I needed to see what I was still having issues with. Like I said, I am not that type of person who is gonna sit on leave and soak it up and then be like, yeah, no, I'm not coming back. Like, that wasn't even a thought really in my head. I couldn't do that to the company. I couldn't do that for my own sake. So I decided to go back partially because of that, but also I wasn't ready to end the chapter of my life. A friend once told me that you cannot leave a bad situation until you're ready to recognize that you need to leave it. So they kind of put it in terms of if you're in a bad marriage, you can have everybody and their mother telling you to get out of your marriage and that you guys need to get a divorce and this and that, but you won't leave until you're ready. And that's kind of what they taught me. Was I needed to come to the realization by myself that it wasn't going to work. And before I went back, I already knew that there was a good chance that it wasn't going to work out, but I needed to find out for myself. While I was back, all of this stuff came back to me. It wasn't a matter of, like, not remembering. I did have some blackout moments where, like, I had no recollection of stuff that, like, I previously knew. So, like, I still have issues with some parts of my memory. But it wasn't that I couldn't perform the job. It was that my body couldn't keep up with the job. So the plasma donation center that I worked at was very high-paced. We couldn't have drinks by us, we couldn't have snacks by us, we were in sections, so we couldn't just leave our donors to go to the bathroom. It was very, very high stress, and although I could handle it throughout the workday, it carried over into my next few days. So if I had off for a weekend after working 5 days, I was dead. Like, I was dead to the world. I was tired. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I'd have a migraine. It was really hard because my mental endurance just wasn't there. It still isn't, like, after a full work day of doing the boutique and eBay and even YouTube, like, I'm tired and I go to bed by like 7:30 if my kids are in bed already. So it was partially because of the mental endurance and the problems going back, but also I was just tired of working there. I went back and it was not the same. So I was part of management, and when I went back from medical leave, I didn't feel like I was part of management anymore because I had to get retrained and everything, and so like I felt like I just got treated differently, and I just didn't want to be there. I had started the boutique while I was out on leave because with insurance, I would go like 3 months without getting paid, and we're like, well, we have to pay our bills. So I started the boutique because it was a passion that I had, and that was kind of what got us through. So I was already doing that. So when I went back, all I could think was, yeah, I want to try to make this work, but I also would rather be at home doing something that I love. And that's kind of what boiled down to it. I was on the fence of leaving from still having deficits from the stroke. I was on the fence with not really wanting to be there, but like I was willing to keep working it out because, I loved it at one point, so maybe I would love it again. And my perspective just changed after feeling like I just kind of didn't belong there anymore. I kind of pulled the trigger. I was like, you know what? I have the boutique. It's not exactly up to where I need it to be in order to quit my job, but I can't scale it either if I didn't quit my job. So I pulled the trigger. And I know that's kind of what most of you have been watching this video to hear was, there's never a good time to pull the trigger, quit your job. If you're waiting for the perfect moment, it's never going to happen. We really I shouldn't say we couldn't afford for me to do it. It was definitely an adjustment, because we can still get by with our bills and stuff, but like it's going to change the way that we live. So like I can't go to Target and spend $200 on a Target trip just because I want this plant in this basket. Like, it's definitely an adjustment. But starting your own business, making the leap from your corporate job to like being your own boss, it's not comfortable. And there's a quote out there somewhere, I don't know the exact quote, but you can't be successful without being uncomfortable. So I think that's really important for the people who are still watching this video to see like the end of it. If you're debating on quitting your job, do it. It is so worth it. It is so worth, like, for me, I had to wear uniforms and I couldn't eat or drink when I wanted. Like, for me, that alone is worth it. I get to see my kids after daycare every single day, and if I want to keep them home and just have a lighter work day, I can do that. So it is totally worth the struggle. It is totally worth being uncomfortable. I have always been one of those believers that, like, just keep shooting for more. If you're fine in your job, but you're wanting more, go get the more. I can't say that enough. I know people look for these videos about how I quit my job just so that they can get up the motivation and the courage to do it. Just do it. You can watch, like me, you can watch thousands of hours of videos about how I quit my job and how I started YouTube and this is what I do to make money from home. Like, you can watch all the videos you want, but nothing's going to happen unless you pull the trigger, put in your notice, and start doing something. If you really, really, really can't afford to do that, start it while you're at work. Start it part-time. Start doing eBay part-time. Start a boutique part-time. Start doing YouTube part-time. Whatever you want to do, just start doing it. Because all you're doing by waiting is losing time that you could have had towards whatever you're trying to work for. So I think that's kind of the I don't know, the punchline, the point of the video is like, I quit my job. You can do it too. It is so, so, so rewarding. Cody was making fun of me, but with one of my other videos, because I was like, I love, love, love it. Seriously, I love staying home. I love, love, love it. He told me I should put that in every video. I'm not going to do that, but there it is, Cody. So for the people still watching, pull the trigger. Just do it. I can't tell you how comfortable you're going to be. I can't tell you what you need to do for it, because until you have an idea of how you want to work from home, how you want to start your own business, you're not going to know either. But definitely the best advice I can do is just do it. So thank you for watching this. I know it was a little bit longer than I planned, so I'm sorry for that. I appreciate everyone that stayed till the end to watch this. If you like my video, go ahead and hit the like button. If you want to keep watching my videos, go ahead and hit subscribe. I would really appreciate it. But yeah, so that's about all I have to say for today. Until next time, I will see you guys later.